It was a cold winter night, and my best friend Alex and I had made plans to celebrate Halloween in our small rented house. Being in our final year of college, we felt too old for the usual Halloween festivities, but we still wanted to add a touch of mystery to our celebration. Eventually, we decided to bake cookies and watch a scary movie. Since it was only 8 p.m., most grocery stores were still open, and I decided to drive to the store to pick up the ingredients for baking. While shopping in the store and browsing the shelves for ingredients, I noticed a man looking at me from the corner of my eye. Although I didn't directly make eye contact, I could tell that he was staring at me the whole time I was in the aisle. It was just before closing time, and the store was nearly empty. The man's behavior was quite unsettling. I quickly grabbed what I needed and proceeded to check out and leave the store. As I left the store, I had almost forgotten about the man. While driving home, there were very few cars on the road, as it seemed that most people had already settled in for the night. When I turned onto my street, I noticed a car moving slowly in front of my house. The car was moving at a snail's pace, perhaps at 5 miles per hour. The windows of the car were tinted, so I couldn't see who was inside or what they were doing. However, after passing by my driveway, the car suddenly accelerated and sped away, making it clear that they had intentionally moved slowly in front of our house. It left me feeling quite uneasy. Upon arriving home, I had almost forgotten about the car. I told Alex about the experience, but he didn't seem too concerned. We put the cookies in the oven and sat in the kitchen while they baked, discussing which movie to watch. Just when we were deciding on a film, the doorbell rang. We exchanged confused glances, and Alex went to answer the door. I watched from the kitchen as he looked through the peephole for a moment and then opened the door, only a few inches. I heard Alex asking who it was, but the person on the other side remained silent. Then Alex closed the door and locked it. He said that the person was wearing a cheap plastic mask, and based on their other features, it sounded like the man I had seen at the store. I went to the door to take a look myself. Peering through the peephole, no one was there, but as I continued to watch, I noticed a car parked across the street, the same one that had passed by earlier. It was now right in front of our house, with its lights off and the engine seemingly not running. I informed Alex about the car, and we both went to take a closer look. However, just as we were about to do so, we heard a thud that reverberated through the house. We stopped and listened. Hearing the thuds again, now coming from the basement, I cautiously opened the basement door and looked down the staircase as the thudding sounds grew louder. Then they abruptly ceased. There was a moment of silence before we heard faint footsteps shuffling in the basement. I softly closed the door without making any noise, and Alex immediately called the police. The basement door had no lock, so I pressed my body against it, hoping for the best. We listened as the muffled footsteps moved across the basement and reached the bottom of the stairs. Where they came to a halt, the suspense was overwhelming, and my heart raced. Alex grabbed my shoulder and urged me to come with him. We rushed to the front of the house and got into my car, driving a few streets away to wait for the police. When they arrived, there was no one inside the house, however. The basement door was wide open, and there were footprints leading from the broken window well. Outside, the car had vanished. indicating that the intruder had left as soon as he realized we weren't in the house anymore. We never found out who the man was or why he had followed us from the store, stalked us, and broken into our house. I just hope that I never have to find out. It was a dark, stormy Halloween night, and Sarah found herself alone in her remote cabin, nestled deep in the woods. She had always preferred solitude, and Halloween was no exception. Her usual tradition involved lighting some candles, sipping on hot cocoa, and watching horror movies. This Halloween, however, was different. The evening had been oddly silent, devoid of the usual laughter and chatter from trick-or-treaters. Sarah attributed it to the remote location of her cabin as she settled onto her couch, wrapped in a cozy blanket. A sudden knock on the cabin door sent shivers down her spine. Startled, she opened the door slightly and peered out into the inky darkness. A lone figure stood there, hidden under a hooded cloak. "Trick or treat," the figure whispered, voice barely audible over the howling wind. Sarah hesitated, but then reached for a candy bowl. She handed a piece to the mysterious trick-or-treater, who took it without a word. The figure didn't move, just stood there, hidden in shadows. "Is there something else I can help you with?" Sarah finally asked, growing uneasy. The figure raised its head slightly, revealing a pale, gaunt face with empty eye sockets. A chill raced down Sarah's spine, and she slammed the door shut, locking it. She retreated to the safety of her living room, her heart pounding like a drum. As Sarah tried to regain her composure, she heard faint, haunting whispers emanating from outside the cabin. The whispers grew louder and more insistent, causing her to panic. She rushed to the windows, but all she could see were countless hooded figures surrounding her cabin in a sinister circle. Desperation filled her as she realized there was no escape. Sarah grabbed her phone and dialed 911, but the signal was weak, and the line was filled with eerie static. She could only manage to utter her location before the call dropped. The whispers grew louder, now a cacophony of sinister voices that seemed to be speaking in unison. They chanted in a language she couldn't understand, and the cabin's walls began to tremble. Terrified, Sarah realized that she was trapped in a nightmare. She had to find a way out. She ran to the back door, flung it open, and dashed into the woods, the chilling chants still echoing behind her. The hooded figures pursued her, their footsteps a menacing symphony. She sprinted through the dense woods, her heart pounding, branches slashing at her as she fled into the darkness. The figures were relentless, their voices closing in on her. Just when she thought she couldn't run any longer, she stumbled upon an old, forgotten graveyard hidden deep in the woods. Sarah pushed open the rusty gate, praying for safety among the forgotten souls. The figures hesitated, unable to pass the threshold. Sarah was safe, at least for now. She watched as they retreated into the woods, disappearing into the shadows from whence they came. Alone in the eerie silence of the graveyard, Sarah had narrowly escaped the clutches of the hooded figures. She knew she would never forget that Halloween night, a night that forever changed her perception of solitude and darkness. Let's go back to 2019, when my friends and I were really excited. We were eagerly looking forward to Halloween, knowing it might be our last year to go trick-or-treating. As we got older, trick-or-treating started to feel a bit odd, but we didn't want to miss this last opportunity. Our school had a half day, giving us some extra time, but we decided to meet up in the evening. The excitement reached its peak as the sun began to set, and we dressed up in costumes, ready to go out. The three of us were dressed in black clothes and old masks we found, not putting much effort into it, but we were acceptable as trick-or-treaters. We met at my house to start our adventure. Our goal was to get to the other end of the neighborhood, where special houses awaited. These houses were known for giving out full-sized candies. We visited most of the houses on the way, and it took us almost 2 hours, but finally we reached the big houses. Most of the other kids had already gone home, and the streets were mostly empty. We started a bit late, but it was still too early for people to go to bed. As we approached each of the big houses, we realized a flaw in our plan. The houses were quite far apart, and it took about 5 minutes of walking to reach each door. We had to jog from house to house to make it through them all in time. By the time we finished the last few houses, most of them had turned their lights off, and no one was answering the doors. It was just past 9 p.m., and it was really dark. But it wasn't late enough for people to be going to bed. We all agreed it was time to head back to my house, so we could watch some movies and eat our candy. But as we began walking down the street, we saw a man walking toward us. It was very dark, and we couldn't see his face, but he was definitely an adult wearing a hood covering his face. We were the only ones on the road besides him, and it was an odd sight on a night when kids were supposed to be out and about. We moved to the other side of the road as we passed him, and he tried to hide it, but it was pretty obvious. He was looking right at us. This was really weird behavior, and none of us wanted to stick around, but we were all exhausted from having to run from house to house over the past couple hours, so we opted for just walking quickly and checking behind us to make sure we weren't being followed. After a few minutes, we felt like we had put a good distance between us and the man, but out of nowhere, my friend in front stopped abruptly, causing me to bump into him and stumble back. I jokingly called him a few choice words, but when I looked up, I immediately fell silent. There was a hooded man standing at the side of one of the houses ahead, hiding between the trees. He was just standing there as if he was waiting for us to get closer. We were whispering to each other as we stood in the road, trying to decide what to do. But there wasn't much to decide on. There was only one way out, which was the way we were heading, so we kept walking, keeping our eyes on the man as we got closer and closer, just about to pass him. He started quickly walking out of the woods and toward us. All of us started running, making a break for the trees on the other side of the road. We stayed together, running into the woods in the direction that we hoped would lead to the other neighborhood. After a minute or so, we realized the man had either lost us or stopped following. We took a moment to collect ourselves, leaning up against a tree. Only a minute passed before we heard footsteps in the leaves somewhere out in the woods nearby. We silenced our breathing as best we could and listened as they slowly moved through the dark, eventually fading out. We waited a bit to make sure it was safe, then hurried out of the woods and made it back to my house. None of us had the nerve to call the cops, but we didn't see any other kids outside on our way back, so hopefully they'd already gotten home. We don't know what that man was trying to do, but chasing us into the woods and continuing to try to find us only makes it more terrifying. We stopped going out for Halloween after that, but I still get chills thinking about that night. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more horror tales and chilling experiences. Share your fears, experiences, or requests in the comments, and let us continue to send you into terror in our next video. Remember, what might be lurking in the shadows of the night? Share your chilling moments and join our channel. Sweet nightmares.